Let's return to This Week in America. Here's your host, Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, Coast to Coast. Thank you for joining us. In our powerful memoir, Fighting to Survive the Suicide Disease, Judy Rentz shares how agonizing it is to spend a lifetime in pain. A pain so intense at times she could barely speak or move. A true story of how she survived and continues to fight the physical battles she still faces, with personal persistence and determination. Fighting to Survive the Suicide Disease is the story of Judy's physical pain, at times agonizing, seemingly unrelievable, and her unconquerable spirit and will to live. And author Judy Rentz is our guest on This Week in America. Judy, welcome to the program. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you for having me.
This is such a remarkable story and so much that you've gone through. We'll touch just the surface during the interview today, direct people to Judy's website, to Amazon, to booksidepress.com, the publisher, for information on getting the book. But this has basically been, as I understand, a lifetime of pain for you, and it began at birth. Give us a little bit of background on what you went through, the pain you went through as a child.
Well, I was born as a 10-pound breech, a country home birth. My mother had labored for 2 days, and finally a country doctor came, and she was dying. I was her 8th child. But anyway, a country doctor finally came, and he just jerked and pulled and tugged and ripped me any way he could get me out. Nothing could wait any longer. But I remember when I was a little girl, probably to the age of 4, of crying of hip and leg pain. And as far back as that. And there was no reason for it. I hadn't played hard, but when I got a little older, my mother said, well, no wonder you hurt. I never dreamed you would be alive. And that's the first time she had ever told me how I was born. But later on, my sisters told me, and they said, oh, it was just such a horrible, horrible day. We stayed outside, of course, because there was screaming and whatever. And we just stayed outside, and occasionally we would look. It was just horrendous. But anyway, there was pain from birth, and I didn't know this was the culprit until 2013, when finally, help had come through a miracle in the form of Dr. Antelak in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And he studied me and studied my nerves and the disease and traced it back to that was the source of my pudendal nerve disease. And most people never know how they get it. One friend in Australia, she heads up sort of like I did. I was on the phone usually 4 hours a day talking to people all over the world, wanting help. But anyway, Dr. Antelak in 2013 found me. And before that, life was just a nightmare. It hit me. I was a landscape gardener. We had retired in Tennessee, which is my birthplace, outside of Knoxville, and small home because we wanted small. I knew I couldn't take care of a big house.
Yes.
But anyway, doing landscape, my last project was my neighbor's yard, and I'd put in a waterfall. I had help, but a gardener can't keep her hands out of dirt. So I did her entire yard and a waterfall, but I had to keep going home for to lie down. My low back was throbbing and aching. So I would get back up, check on the landscape, and that was my last landscape project. And What do you want to know after that?
Well, that's interesting what you went through. And talk about briefly here, but gardening was something that got you through these difficult times. And I understand your faith got you through a lot, and singing. That would sort of take you to a different place and would put the pain maybe off to the side for a short while.
Yes. My salvation was God and my association with church. I've been in church since in utero, and sang always growing up, but choir, I loved choir. So when we moved back to Tennessee from Florida, which I had to, I was flying back and forth after I had found a second specialist in pudendal nerve disease, and I was flying back and forth from Tampa constantly for internal injections, and it just got to be so expensive. So we had to leave Florida and move nearer Chattanooga, Tennessee. But anyway, for 6.5 years, I lay every day just staring out the window at the birds. And I had brought with me 300 perennials in my husband's little truck, and whatever I could carry. Also 300 perennials from Pittsburgh. And my back garden was just a beautiful garden and a park like. I had put in a little water feature, just beyond beautiful. And I had a lot of garden parties, and I could get through those.
Yes.
It was such a joy in my life, and choir was such a joy. I'm a gregarious person, and it was just such a joy to be able to do that. And then on Sundays also. And yes, the gardening got me through a lot of times. And then later, when I could not garden anymore, my neighbors had set up a platform for me, and I got a literal a frame for a bunk bed. It was like a camping frame on my platform. My son had given me an outdoor radio that my husband ran underground, and then I had a therapy pool put in '06, and that was my life. In the summer, that was my life, looking at my garden, lying in my garden. And I had a lot of friends in that neighborhood.
And that had to help too. That did so much for you to get you through this. Our guest is Judy V. Rentz. And I'm going to spell that because her website is judyvrentz.com. V is in Victor, and then RENTZ, judyvrentz.com, her website. Book is published by BookSidePress.com. That's their website. Amazon, of course, all the usual places for the book. And we have all that on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. The book is Fighting to Survive the Suicide Disease by Judy Rentz. Before we talk about finally getting a diagnosis, you went through a period of misdiagnosis, and really you had an illness that really didn't have a name. Talk about the frustration of them not being able to find out what the problem was. In fact, sometimes doubting you and maybe even thinking you were addicted to drugs of some kind.
Oh, absolutely. There was no name that anyone knew, and I was just compelled to write this book. I am praying that the medical community will get wind of this, I'm praying for a class taught on this. I've only had 2 residents, excuse me, in the 15.5 years that I've had this disease. 2 residents have told me that they had a very short line saying the word pudendal nerve, not a class, but that they had heard the word twice. That was it. And there are no medical professionals. But anyway, I searched when I was in bed. My husband had just given me an iPad, and I didn't know how to use it, but I learned quickly. I searched the world over. I mean, the world over. And Europe only had 1 doctor. but Ben was searching at the same time. And I had gone ahead and bought the house in Tennessee, and we were going to go back and forth to Pittsburgh. My grandgirls were there, and my daughter and family, but I couldn't sit. I couldn't stand. I couldn't sit, and all I could do is rise in bed and practically crawl to the bathroom. But anyway, there was no name. Primaries knew no name, and I had 2 women doctors, and they were just very busy planning their own families themselves. And they gave me hydrocodone, which would not make a toe stop aching, and didn't have any need or any want to study what was wrong with me. So I just died. In those 6.5 years, all I did was study. I couldn't do any. I did make myself crawl out, put myself together, and get to choir on Wednesday and church on Sunday morning. But in all the searching in those years, that's when I didn't realize it was a cult, but my neighbor had seen me weeping, and I read my Bible and tried to find answers. Why? Every day, all day, with my gospel or contemporary on outside in the yard, and then back and forth to the therapy pool. That was life for me. And Ben was still working in Pittsburgh, but he was trying to find answers along the same time. But there were no answers. I went everywhere, and all the people who lead you on. I was sent to a back surgeon, the first official surgeon I was sent to. People always go to back doctors, and surgeons love to cut.
Yep, yes.
And many, many people that I had talked to are taken in literally because they've lost everything they had in back surgeries and any other surgery that they thought somebody talked them into thinking it might help. But anyway, people lost every penny that they had. And this back surgeon that saw me, I did his little things that he had me do and went to physical therapy. And there was a lot of it I could not do. I couldn't ride a bike, and I couldn't do all the physical things that they want you to do in physical therapy. I couldn't do it. And the pain, I staggered in with pain, but after that didn't work, I had a recheck with that back surgeon, and I held onto the walls getting in. It was just torture. Ben wasn't here to take me to the doctor, and I could hardly drive. But I held onto the walls trying to get in, and it took me forever, and got to my room. And the famous, very famous, he'd worked with UT football players and everything, and came into the room. Well, how are you? And I said, well, I'm horrible. And he stood up. I can't help you. And I looked puzzled. What am I supposed to do? He said, stood up, was at the door, see a psychiatrist, and slammed the door.
Wow.
Now, I don't cry easily, but I fell to the floor and I wept and I wept.
Well, yeah, hearing
I
that.
knew this wasn't.
Yeah, when you hear that and you know what you're going through, our guest on the program is Judy Rentz, R-E-N-T-Z. The book is Fighting to Survive the Suicide Disease. Judy's website is judytherentz.com. I'll give you that before the end of the conversation, and we have it on the website. Once you find a doctor, initially, as I understand, you're told in about a year you could get an appointment. Talk about that, getting in to see the doctor, and being told basically you could die with this.
Well, absolutely. The first doctor I had, Rick, is one of my miracles. In all these years, I had gone to what was a cult. I didn't know it was a cult, but my son is a doctor theologian in the military with the Marines. But anyway, he said, Mother, didn't you know? And my friend had asked to take me. She said, I hear you praying and crying out there all afternoon. Would you consider? And her previous pastor, had recommended this place. But I went everywhere. I went to mountain doctors. And I went to one my husband suggested. She prayed with me, gave me a jar of whiskey with black walnut. And I'd never touched whiskey in my life or liquor, but I secretly drank that stuff thinking it was going to be a miracle. But anyway, I didn't find my first surgeon. My first surgeon, I put out a worldwide plea. There is something called not the World Health Organization, not the big one, but World Health, and the girl in Australia that heads up pain in that area and talks to people in that part of Europe. Anyway, I just put out a world plea. Anybody, anywhere that could help me with this unusual pain that's killing me. I weighed about 80 pounds, Rick, and I'm 5'6".
Amazing.
And you can't eat when you hurt that badly. No. But I put out a plea on the internet, and of course I was lying in my backyard, and less than 5 minutes, a Dr. Antelak called me, and he explained that he had found the plea and explained what he was. He had retired from Mayo as a urologist, and he had seen so many patients. That's the other doctor that primaries will send you to. He had seen so many patients with this, and he knew what it was. I didn't even have to explain anything to him. I just cried. And he said, I'm going to get you in as fast as I can get you in. And he did. My first surgery was December the 13th. And he would have gotten me sooner, except the scheduler had promised other people. And of course, when you get a promise, I'm not the only person in the world with pain, but I had killer pain. But anyway, I got to him, and he did a surgery that's not done anymore. It's bilateral through both sides of your butt. And they pull out all the nerves, and it's like putting them on a hanger. They separate and untwist and paint each nerve with something so they won't bind up again. And what he found in me on the left side, and I assume since birth, on the left side, my pudendal had bound into a ball, a little less than a baseball, but not as small as a tennis ball. They had bound round and round in a cotton styrofoamic substance that he sent off to be tested. And on the left, the pudendal goes back and forth over your lower half. And some people have it in their rear areas, the pain. Some people just have pelvic pain. And anyway, the right side of me had gone round and round the iliac bone, the big fan-shaped bone, until it was thin as dentifloss. And then They still try to connect to the spine. And he said, he was 81 when he did my surgery, but he said, I have never in my life seen anything like it. And I was dying. There was no doubt I was dying. And the most amazing relief. He was the sweetest doctor in the world, like my granddaddy. I just loved the man, and he saved my life, literally. But got back home, and I'm one of the few who developed scar tissue. So I got 6 months of amazing relief, but he said there'll be no more gardening for you, no more squatting, no more bending. My husband was sure to bring that up. And he said there can never be any more of that for you. So in the meantime, we moved to Florida, and all the pain resurfaced again. And I hired a gardener. Sarasota even came down. The garden club came down. Can we come again? And I said, absolutely. It was absolutely beautiful. It surrounded my house, but I had to hire it done. I bought the plants, and they hired it done, or I hired it done.
Yes.
And had a wonderful gardener. But anyway, the pain started all over again. And I found it was a miracle. I searched everywhere I went to, and oh gee, I don't want to forget that radiologist intervened. Oh, I want to forget the first name, Rick. A radiologist who didn't give out medicine, but he did blocks.
Oh, yeah,
and,
okay, yes.
Pardon me?
Yes, go ahead.
He did blocks through my back, and as many as 25 one time. And it would keep me out of enough pain so that I could live. And I could take little walks in the neighborhood, and it was so beautiful. We were so blessed. We never dreamed we could live in Venice, Florida. And it was a God thing. Ben put our house in Tennessee on the market. It sold in 2 days. He sold it himself. We put an ad in the paper, and 2 couples walked in. The second couple said, "This is it. We're not looking any further."
Amazing.
And when we got to Florida, the lady had already sold her house. Beautiful, beautiful neighborhood. And she'd already sold her house. Her husband had died of cancer, and she was moving to Chicago with her daughters. She'd already bought her condo. So everything fell into place. It was just a God thing.
If you're just joining us, I want to let people know who's tuning in who our guest is and get a copy of the book, because this is just a remarkable story. If you're keeping track of miracles,
it goes on.
Yeah, if you're keeping track of miracles, we have several so far and many more in the book. It's Judy Rentz, R-E-N-T-Z. The book is published by BookSidePress.com, the publisher. The book available there as well. Amazon, the usual places. Judy's website is Judy V as in Victor Rentz, RENTZ.com. Time is going by so quickly. I encourage you to get a copy of the book. The book is designed to help people that are going through a similar set of circumstances that Judy went through. The subtitle of the book is Fighting to Survive the Suicide Disease. This really is called a suicide disease, isn't it?
Yes, because people that don't get any help, and the government got involved with pain meds. And I know addicts choose to be addicts because you can not take them, unless you're in dire pain, and thank God my doctor can give me 20 of his worst patients he can give some medicine to. But the government got involved. And when it was time for my meds in Florida, I got to the office and he said, "I'm so angry. I am not allowed to give you one thing." And he knew what I was going through. But anyway, I was led on so many times in Florida. It just seemed there was no hope. There was no way out. And I went to the University of Miami. My radiologist finally said, "If you were my wife, I would have you go to a neurologist." And we searched all over Tampa. There was no one who would take me. Then we started calling all over Miami. Well, the head of all the Miami neurologists took me. And I went 1 week. He said, "Be ready to go into Miami University Hospital this Friday. Be here at 9 a.m. on the dot. Be ready for surgery." And he said, "In the meantime, get all new MRIs, everything you can get new from me." He said, "Did they not show on my old MRIs? Did they not show you this, not this, not this?" And I'm just amazed at what he said. Did they not show you?
Wow.
Meaning my other doctors. But anyway, got down there, and I also sent it to another doctor who claimed he was a pudendal specialist. And Venice is about 2 hours from Miami. You would know that. But anyway, got down there, raced by 9 o'clock, and it was horrible for me to ride. Pain was insurmountable. But got there at 9 o'clock. He walked into his office, and the nurse had popped up my new MRIs. He walked in. He was so high and mighty. I don't know any other words to say. He could hardly introduce himself. He was beautiful and high and mighty. But anyway, I'm always the one to stick my hand out first. But anyway, he looked at me and said, "I can't help you." He had decided that week he was not going to take my case.
Wow.
And he could have helped me. He could have helped me.
Yes.
It's a nerve problem. But anyway, I said, what? He said, I can give you an injection. And he walked out the door.
Amazing.
With me mouth open and gaping. And the nurse came in with a needle, and I said, I can get this in Venice. And walked out.
Without the car drive.
We just could not believe it. And on the way home, I called the other doctor, and his nurse went into his office. Now, this has been in a matter of 6 months to 8 months that it took me that long to get them. And this doctor who claimed he worked on pudendal patients, and I wrote him a letter as bad as I am. And his nurse went in and prowled on his desk. I told her what had just happened to me. And I said, what did Dr. So-and-so say about the disease and my problem? And she went in and she piled through all the papers on his desk. She said, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you are on the bottom of the pile, and it says, refer to Dr. I've forgotten the name of the doctor in New Jersey just at the moment. Refer to Dr. So-and-so. Well, he had died 2 years before.
Wow.
And anyway, that's how much that doctor cared. So I went back to Venice, and I knew my husband had to have rectal surgery. And I cried all the way home. But I drove by myself to the office that the rectal surgeon was in, and I cried at the front desk. I guess people thought I was absolutely crazy. I cried my heart. You couldn't help but cry. I was in the most horrendous pain, hanging on to the front desk, begging them to please let me talk to the surgeon. I was game for anything that they would do to me. And another nurse, a head nurse, I'm sure, came out and took me into the door where people couldn't hear me. And I told her again, and I was barely onto the floor. I couldn't hold on. There was something to hold on to, but I couldn't stand, and I was dying of what it feels like is your bones are coming out your rectum. I'll just be blunt.
Yeah, okay.
Your iliac bones and your big sacrum bones are trying to get out of your body. And I never had pelvic pain, but your bones are trying to get out. And that's what you feel. And it's like the last end stage of childbirth with no medication.
And to feel that throughout your life, Judy, we had a couple minutes left. Tell us how that ended, and then we'll give people information so they can follow your story in the book.
And that ended with that doctor coming out and asking me what the problem was. And he said, make her an appointment for next week. I don't know what he planned to do, but in the meantime, I went home crying. I'll make this real short, and praying and crying and praying. And Ben was out on the lanai with me. And we both were on a computer looking and praying. And I happened to, this name ran through my head, Dr. Furr in Chattanooga. Honest, this name ran through my head. I had never heard of the man. But I called. I said, all I want to know is any doctor in Tennessee doing pudendal nerve surgery. She said, oh, he does that now. I got the scheduler.
Amazing.
Just luckily, I got the scheduler. And I told her, she said, but he's booked into next year. And I said, I won't be here. And she said, hold on. And I explained to her a little bit what the pain was. She said, hold on a minute. I had heard a man's footsteps walk through. And he rarely is in the office because he does surgery all the time. He walked through and he said, send her up now. She said, can you be here Wednesday morning? I said, absolutely. It was Monday morning. Absolutely. I will be there. And I got there and he said, I won't even touch you in your condition. He gave me tons of medicine. I went to my sister's and she got me back, but I called Ben and I called from her house and I was in the floor writhing, twisting, screaming. I called the nurses and I said, I'm not going to make it. And hence suicide, or you die. You just die. You can stroke out with this disease. And they got him and he said, send her on immediately. He won't let anybody die that gets to him, and I've sent people to him. But anyway, Ben came, and Dr. Furr came out and told him, she's dying. Do I have your permission to do anything? He said, you do whatever you need to do. That was my second miracle.
Amazing.
So I'll stop on that.
Amazing. Now, the book details all of this. It's so much more. With all of this going on, Judy basically takes on the insurance companies to be able to pay the horrendous expenses that people have, especially when you're going from doctor to doctor because you can't get an answer as to what the problem is. All of this in Judy's book, Fighting to Survive the Suicide Disease, Judy V. Rentz. V as in Victor. Her website is judyvrentz.com. The book is available wherever books are sold, Amazon, for example, the usual places. It's published by Brookside Press. Their website is brooksidepress.com. Book availability there as well. Judy, this story deserves a whole lot more. Hopefully we can do this again. You're helping so many people who are going through similar circumstances, and they really begin to question whether life is worth it if they're going to have to spend it in pain. You have the answer in the book, Fighting to Survive. Thank you for joining us on the program. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for letting me speak on it again.
It is our pleasure. You are helping so many people. The book is Fighting to Survive the Suicide Disease. Judy V. Rentz. Information on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You're listening to This Week in America, and we're back on today's program right after these messages.
This Week in America is online. You can visit our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Scott Pinkerton, associate producer of This Week in America. Jay Anderson, segment producer. Ben Watson, webmaster. Otto Bechet, director of engineering and TV production. This Week in America produced and is a trademark of Blue Funk Broadcasting, LLC. For information on all of our guests and to listen to this week's show, our website again at thisweekinamerica.us. And I'm Sean Bratton, executive producer of This Week in America.